Hello, and welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, Emmet Lewis. And unfortunately, this week, my co host Mikael Christiansen is in the depths of production with his circus company working on their piece Vold. So they are called Right Way Down. If you want to have an idea of what they're up to, you should check them out on Instagram. And yeah, he's super, super busy and unable to get recording this. Anyone who's ever done any shows or productions will know, like, when you're in this kind of production period, you can put in very long days, very interesting days, very mentally intense and physically intense. It's you get an interesting type of fatigue where you're like destroyed, but running on adrenaline and excitement, particularly if things are working. And from what I've been hearing from Mikael, and yeah, it seems that they're doing good. I've seen a few clips from it. There is a trailer out as well, so I'm really looking forward to this show as well. It's taking hand balance to strange new narrative places, I suppose, rather than our standard handstand skill track, I suppose, would be the easy way to think about it. We have an audio postcard from Mikael as well to say hi to you guys.
So, hello to everyone who is listening, and also you, Emmet. I am not on this week's podcast because I am actually in Denmark working with my circus company Right Way Down on the show called Vold, which is premiering next year at a festival in the south of France. So yeah, currently we are doing quite a lot of work on trying to finish the show, even though COVID-19 happened and it drastically changed our schedules. So we just had to find basically ways of working around it. So we're co-produced, as it's called, by a place here in Denmark called Dynamo Workspace, which is essentially a circus training and creation space that are co-producing our show. So yeah, we're here every day now trying to figure out like the details and to slot together the pieces of the puzzle to make this show into something that's preferably pretty good, we hope. Loads of the concepts are kind of clear, but to, of course, make something go from a conceptual stage to actually functioning in a performance context is, of course, like a very different thing. So it does take quite a lot of work, and it's very different from just developing an act or so on, where you just basically need to fill 5 minutes or less than 10 minutes at least with some sort of interesting or like an entertaining material. So we're trying to go in depth with the various concepts we've chosen, and yeah, it's coming along, I hope. Still a reasonable amount of time and effort left before we can say ourselves happy with what we have, but at least it's heading in the right direction. So last push now for the last week, we have invited a rope artist named Tom Brand, who also did the same school as us others, the circus school in Stockholm, who works in a circus company called Svalbard. And he's here now as what is called an artistic outside eye, basically being a person on the outside, giving a bit of insight then from how it is to view it from the audience's perspective, which is very difficult to have and kind of a proper perspective on when you're on stage. So that's what I'm doing this week. So hope you enjoy the rest of the garbage that Emmet Lewis has to share with you.
Thank you, Mikael, for letting us know what's going on. So today on the Minisode, we are doing a special Minisode based on your flexibility questions and issues. I have a few questions from Instagram. We have a few from our normal question stack. You know yourself, guys. If you want to ask us any questions, you can either DM them to Handstand Factory on Instagram. You can use the contact form on our website. You can send in audio questions on anchor.fm if you go to our page there. And yeah, sort of thing. If you want to send in answers to questions, we'll try and pair them up as well. But you can't know what the question is beforehand. Yeah, so I'm just going to get straight into our questions. I really like the longest lunge exercise. And hold on, get on my screen. #prepared. I really like the longest lunge exercise, and I'm struggling to keep the balance when I drive into a deeper stretch. Any tips on how to keep balance? Should I concentrate on my balance or more on depth? What I like about the longest lunge exercise is that in some ways it's self-limiting. that because we're forcing the body into a isometric position, and it can be going deep and it's challenging in a lot of ways. By having the balance as one of the components we have to work on, you find there's a overlapping way of progressing. That one, you'll go deeper, but then your balance is terrible, so that limits how deep you could go. This is particularly important for people who are quite flexible, and that kind of lets them build up strength, and then once they're strong enough and have enough control, they can go a bit deeper. So I generally tell people just to only go as deep as your balance allows for whatever time you're working at, 30, 40, 90 seconds, whatever it is. And that's it. Now, if you find your strength and you're just off, like say, I don't know, say a classic one, you sprained one of your ankles one time in the past and they still have balance issues to this day. Obviously you can work on your balance, but then maybe we'll be limiting our rate of progress in this kind of flexibility drill. So what you can do here is just grab 2 sticks, 2 broom handles, just use them like ski poles. So you're not holding onto the ground completely, but you're just there like a training wheel on a bike. If you go over too far, you can put it down and put it down the other way. So you can just imagine you're skiing down into your split. And, that's a fun thing to do. Other than that, it will come, it also depends on like, what are you doing this on are you doing the longest lunge in shoes? Did it have good grip? Is the floor too slippy? These kind of things will affect it as well. So do play with those kind of things. And I hope that helps a bit. Oh, another front split question. So how would you recommend going into front split? Just slide into it or with a certain exercise? So we have to kind of clear a few things up, I suppose, about flexibility. Is we have all these cool exercises for gaining range of motion and developing active flexibility and putting it into use for what we do. Eventually we want to be free of these exercises and just choose however we want to do the split. So when you're training and developing the split, I like people to initially set up in a kind of our normal kneeling hip flexor kind of exercise, and then push backwards into it. Why I like this is if you push backwards into the split, it means your hips will stay squarer. And there's a tendency when you're doing front split, if you put the classic kneeling kind of entry into it, you kneel, you max out the depth that your hips can allow on a true square hip front split. So then you think, I'll go forward. And that just gives your body a cue to turn out into the split. Not that the turn out split is wrong, but we're just talking about square one here. So by pushing forward, you can end up in a position where you're quite turned out, and then you'll have to either reset your hips or, get your split flat and then do a bit of work to tidy it up at the end. So, but the going backwards into the split, even from a straight leg or from a bent leg, it seems in most cases to end up, you might not have the satisfaction as going as deep as you think you can go, but you will end up in a much squarer position. And this is very useful, particularly if we're working on the square split. Hopefully that answers it. And question number 3. I keep hearing different opinions about bouncing when stretching a muscle. What does the flexibility wizard think is best? As people probably know, I am in favor of pulsing type stretching. So that covers ballistic stretching. We have to think about, there's 2 different types. Well, there's a lot of different types, but there's 2 main types. There is high amplitude, low frequency ballistic stretching. This is basically like kick your leg as high and as hard as you can. And it happens like every couple of seconds. So you're going for like a big range of motion. And then we have the other side of low amplitude, high frequency stretches where we're going into the stretch maybe 1 rep a second, going in, out, in, out. I'm in favor of these kind of stretches. They are advantageous because they train the parallel elastic components to the muscle, so the sinew channels or the tendons or the connective tissue. It's one of these things I would not say is a beginner technique in any way, shape or form. It's a beginner, I suppose, if you're there with a coach who knows what they're doing and they're guiding you through this, then they're perfectly fine. If you're not certain what you're doing, then it's better to get a bit of coaching or find someone who knows what they're doing, if there is such people out there. But in general, it's an interesting type of stretching in that I see it in everyone, that we get permanent changes in flexibility in very short amounts of time that would not happen with either isometric, static, relaxed, working on passive active balance, all these kind of things. And it's very just intriguing to me for this moment. And I think I was at the forefront of bringing this type of stretching back to the public consciousness. That I was hanging out with Craig Mallet online, who's a good friend of mine. He learned a lot of this stuff from Chinese martial arts, and I was kind of playing around with it, wondering why we were told to don't bounce in stretches, and it was terrible. It was through the Kit Lachlan forum, so Kit got involved as well, but we were kind of pushing this type of stretching and playing around and coming up with new exercises and ones we hadn't seen before. And in every single case, once done properly, we all experienced permanent shifts in flexibility. Like, say, I had an interesting case study actually here just myself, that I had head to toe. I haven't really been pushing my flexibility to the forefront at all because I don't need it at the moment. I've basically put it on the shelf while I've been focusing on my Taoist training. And I'd say it's probably been about 3 years since I seriously tried it. And today, because I'm doing a bit of a flexibility challenge on Instagram with the Flexibull and Range of Strength, I was like, okay, I just got to give head to toe a go. And in 2 sets, I was down to 4 fingers to my head, to my toe, 4 fingers away, and I expect in probably about 3 days I'll be back to head to toe. All that, and that was like after, say, when I worked on this position, I worked on it in under 14 days, and I achieved it in that. So for 14 days of work, I have permanent changes in my flexibility. Now, the main thing, what would happen with a lot of people is they get the dosage wrong of this. There's some crazy protocols going around there. Some people might be familiar with them and have you doing 1,600 pulses per leg per day for 45 days or some craziness like this. It's insane. It's too much. The highest protocol we use is probably 200 bounces per day. And that's all. And that gets results. Generally, I've found actually if you combine the pulsing type stretching with a good selection of active flexibility drills and active mobility drills and just looking at your various ratios, you will, need 30 or 40 pulses a day and maybe only 2 sets. So there's a lot of range there to play with. And then there's some layering type of stuff as well, which is very interesting and not really spoken about, in that we can layer the various stretches. So we can layer an isometric with a pulsing type stretch, with a shortening range active type stretch. And all these things are very synergistic. So in one set, we could do everything. If you want to check out how that might work, if you look up my front split deep dive video, I put in my SLP protocol in there, hidden away. So one of our top secret protocols for gaining flexibility, but it's out there in the public now. So yes, I think pulsing is good. It's not for beginners. There's some very cool stuff with the higher amplitude ballistic stuff of, you see this in rhythmic gymnastics a bit, especially in split leaps and kicks. They use this a lot where they'll have TheraBands tied off on their limbs and they'll kick into the band and aim to kick through the band, so the resistance comes on at the very end range, but they've also kicked, and it also helps to accelerate out of the stretch. So very interesting for training things people would say flexibility destroys, like tendon stiffness and stuff like that. So yeah, all in all, it's a good method. It's not the be all and end all. You could never do it in your whole life and still achieve ultimate flexibility potential, but it's worth trying. I have some tutorials on YouTube if you are interested in checking it out. Other than that, yeah, next question. Is there a minimum time that a muscle needs to be stretched? Oh, this is kind of a hard one because I have literally seen everything. And it's one of those things, like if you look at the research, they say static stretches must be held 30 seconds. There's no added benefit for doing longer. I'd argue that they're wrong. Depends on how the stretch is performed, the intentions in it. It's the same. Generally, my rule of thumb is you want to be doing it for 30 seconds minimum. Some people will need to do them longer, much longer. And this will count for all types of stretching, like dynamic stretching when we're counting time on the tension in the stretched area. Isometric stretches, active work where we're trying to lift and pull into our flexibility. Everything could be done longer. It's one of those ones that depends on what effect you're going to look for as well. If we're trying to stress different tissues, then we can look up our strength training zones. Basically, look, does this time on the tension cause hypertrophy? Does it cause tendon change? Does it cause muscle architecture change? All these kind of things have different reactions, I suppose. So there's these things that you have to kind of understand where you're going for, what your effect you're looking for. In general, it gets kind of interesting. Like when you start out, I generally advise people, particularly if you're doing exploratory or relaxed or kind of relax, contract, relax stretches where they're not super intense, spending longer in the position to familiarize yourself with the position and the sensations it brings up is better. Once you know the position, once you're very good at them, you can get in and out and like be released to your, this the other thing is like, are we trying to push our range of motion, or are we just trying to stretch to release the tension, which is very good use of stretching. And we would aim to hold the stretches. When you're trying to release the tension, you're good at it. You can get in and do this in under 20 seconds. If you don't really know how to release tension and relax into stretch and sink and all these kind of cooler things that come in, then you'll have to hold it longer. But it's also a fine line between intensity, how hard it is and how you perceive it to be, and how hard it actually is, or if you're getting the job done. So what I'd say the minimum time I would recommend for most people is 30 seconds. The maximum time, who knows? Other than that, it really comes down to what you're trying to achieve in the stretch. Okay, next question. What makes the difference with the couch stretch ISO exercise, where I have a block between my butt and the wall and I press against it, or not? So this one is, I teach this in the workshops, and I probably have a video of it somewhere as well. It's basically, we're training the shortening side of the hamstring. So we have, say, our wall quadricep couch stretch, which people are probably familiar with. We put our shin against the wall and try to get it closed down. So one of the things I'm always paying attention to is what is the joint side, what side of the joint is shortening and what side is lengthening in any stretch. And a lot of the time in the programs, all right, we will train the shortening side first. So with this shortening side, what we're trying to trigger is this relaxation effect in some ways in the quadricep. The other thing I always think, the way I explain this is, we are trying to bring clarity to the body. In the body, once it's put into some position, it has a tendency to generate co-contraction where both sides of the joint are contracting at once. So what these kind of isometrics do is they turn off that effect and they give clarity, saying, no, the body is working in this way. So when we're doing the wall quadricep, where we're pulling the heel to the bum and crushing the block, we are trying to activate or fire up these muscles and the hamstrings, so the ones that do the leg curling action, and pull, 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 pull. And this will, hopefully, when we go to do our next set, which would be a lengthening side, so the quadricep exercise, allow us to go a bit deeper. It also allows us to pull ourselves deeper into this position. So a lot of cool things going on in this. And then the other side, when we are doing the couch, or when it's not there, if we're doing a couch stretch, we're just pushing, we're strengthening the stretch muscle in the isometric manner, in the lengthened position, and hopefully one, just building up strength so it has less ability to contract against the stretches when we're going, and also just to give it clarity as well. It's like, this is what I do when I'm lengthened. It's very interesting. I always think about this in stretching. Stretching is as much a skill as anything else. Being able to get into these positions, being able to express your maximum, it's a skill. And having an experience of like, okay, I get into position, quite a simple thing, and then I move one way and then I move the other. Can I get into a stretch and can I get out of it? Very simple questions for safety. If we are believers of the stretching and getting deeper into positions, a lot about safety for the body, then, and threat response and these kind of things. Well, then if I have shown the body that I can get in and out of the position, then it's more likely to go into a deeper position. So it's one way to think about it. It's just conceptual. So one of these things is like, if I can't get into a stretch, then can I get out of a stretch? You know, so think about that for all the stretches you do. You know, have you been trying to get something and it's not moving? Well, have you just trained getting into the stretch as an activity, and have you tried to maximize that? So I'm going to jump on our Instagram and see what we have there. Some questions coming through. Loads of questions coming through. Here's a good one. How often should PNF/isometric work be done per week? So this is kind of one of these things that, like, it depends on the duration of the contractions and the intent. The basic contract, relax, antagonist contract technique could be done every single day to get you from a point where you come in, you go, okay, I'm not at my sufficient level of flexibility for my activity I'm about to do. And you could use that technique, 1 or 2 sets, not holding long contraction at the end, and that will get you there. The stronger isometrics where we're holding for 25, 30, 40, 50, 60 seconds, you have to think of them like strength training. They are strength training. So with strength training, we do the training, we stress the body, and then we have a period of reduction, and then we have hopefully a period of overcompensation, and we get stronger. So with the stronger isometrics, when we're really working on our flexibility, you only really need to do them 1 or 2 times a week, and that should be sufficient in most things. You could push it to 3 times a week if it's just one position you're really working on, but generally 2 times is like all people will ever need. Most people with me, when we train, we will do pancake and middle splits twice a week, and we'll do front split and back bridge twice a week, and that's all you really need to do to push it even to the higher levels. Now that goes, you still need to be doing sub-maximal stretching, sub-maximal use of your flexibility as well. So if you're doing handstands, obviously you're trying to use your legs, use your flexibility, use your back flexibility in your shapes. If you're just stretching for the sake of it and not using it, then you have to kind of artificially create that demand. So just bear that in mind, but 1 or 2 times a week is sufficient. Here's one. My wrist hurts a lot no matter how long I warm them up. I even do strength building things. Any tips? Get much, much stronger would be my key there if they are hurting a lot. It's also, you do have to look at, basic things like, what is my position? What is my hand position on the floor? Am I, have you played with a hand position? A lot of people say, depending on where you come from, they're like, there's one hand position, you must do it like this, whatever the hand position may be, and it will vary. And maybe that hand position doesn't suit you, and there's a lot of options for how you have your hand on the floor and how you use it. The other option is if the flat on the floor position just hurts too much and it's making training ineffective, using apparatus like blocks, parallettes, even these you can get these raised cork diagonals, so raise the heel of the hands up would be one thing. The other thing is we have our free grip program on the Handstand Factory website. Check it out and put it to work. It could help a lot. It could be one of these missing components. The other thing is, if it depends on how long you have been strength training, like to build sufficient strength can take a while. You could be looking at 1 year or 2 years of work, consistent work on building up the strength of your hands and wrists. So these things. The other thing, just to caution, is maybe you're just doing too much and you need to go back to, like I said, about the isometric stretching, you need to do strength work maybe 1 or 2 times a week and do a bit less and let it recover. These are things to try out. It's one of these things I actually on note on the wrist component is there's a tendency for people to do wrist preparation every day. And, I used to advise people to do this 4 or 5 years ago, but then I realized that people are just having too many wrist issues. So I backed off it and just gave specific stuff when there was a specific need for it, not as a blanket suggestion. I dropped the level of wrist and tendonitis and all these issues down to very, very low. There's still a bit on the higher levels, which are unavoidable to a certain degree. But this constantly preparing the joints, like a joint preparation exercise, you're stressing the joint to hopefully that it will super compensate and get stronger. Simple. But what can happen if you're doing it every single day? It doesn't get to compensate. And we know our collagen turnover cycles. We know it takes, muscles are ready to go 48 hours afterwards to full power. Maybe 36, I can't remember exact figures. But tendons take 72 hours. So if you're doing connective tissue exercises more than every 72 hours, maybe you're just not recovering. You're just constantly hovering the line of undertrained or under-recovered. So it's definitely something to check out. Myself, I wear wrist straps, cotton ones. They're a long strip of fabric. I wear them mainly just because of the wrist I broke a few years ago. It doesn't really play up anymore, but it's I've gotten used to them, and I like the insulating heat they give. They always keep my wrist nice and warm, and it's one of the things that does make it a bit. Some of the surface I'm training on will be quite cold. So if I haven't got a nice warm surface, or I live in Ireland, it's damp and it's cold everywhere. So I wear them and they help. And what I like about them is I can crank them tight if things are acting up on a day, or you can just have them on and they just keep things cool or keep things warm. and you look cool as well. And we have some Handstand Factory ones. I think we just sold out actually of them, but maybe we have some new ones in the work. Who knows? Next question. How often should you stretch? Once again, going back to if you're doing really effective stretching where you're really pushing your range of motion into a new zone, or that's the intent, you really only need to do it 1 to twice a week. How often should you get into your flexibility positions? I think you should get into them pretty often just to familiarize yourself with the skill of doing them. I think for most people, if you're doing your handstand training, part of your warm-up should include a kind of run-through of your splits. I was talking to one of my clients about this recently, actually, and we do have to think, like in handstands, we have a desired aesthetic of how we want our handstand to look, be it, flex feet, pointed toes, locked knees. All these kind of aesthetic components can be warmed up as well in simpler manners. So if I get into my pancake and I'm like, okay, I want my knees to be nice and hyperextendy, and I want my toes to be nice and pointy, well, then I can spend some time when I'm in my pancake, when I'm just sitting in it and I'm warm, not pushing the range, but warm up the aesthetic I'm thinking about. Same with my split. I'm like, okay, I'm going to warm up my split and use it just to get it to the point where it feels good. And I feel like, there's no restriction to the training I'm going to do that day. I'll get in and go, okay, I want the toes pointed and knees locked. Am I twisting out? Okay, maybe I'll do a bit more that day. But all these things go into the warm-up component of you can warm up the aesthetic and reinforce that, because it's easier to cue into the feeling of having a good toe point and how that feels when you can look at it and cue it in and go, okay, is my foot sickling into the side, or is it not pointed, or is it pointing evenly? And I can do that in my pancake. I can easily assess it. I can lock in the feeling, and then I know what I'm doing, and then I can replicate it in my handstand. Whereas if I just try to find it in my handstand and go check my phone afterwards, there's a non-direct correlation between what you're feeling and what you're seeing. So you should kind of do these positions every day. Eventually you'll get to the point where you don't even need to train them. They're just there. They're just you. So that's kind of always quite interesting. Just our goal is not to train flexibility, but just to be flexible. And that's kind of what a lot of the programs, a lot of the way I train and approach it with people is. It's just like flexible, and it's just there, and you have it for life, or mostly. Happens after a while. A good one, a common one: how to deal with strained hamstrings. So everyone probably, not everyone, hopefully you haven't had experienced this, but how do we, I've stretched my hamstrings too much, or I've done some heady deadlifts, or I've landed wrong from a jump. I know the person who put that question in is a parkour person, so landed too hard. So first thing, the acute phase, it's the key to healing any kind of injury is you've got to rest, but not too much. You've got to move it, but not too much. You've got to strengthen it, but not too much. So generally, if we're in the very acute phase and it's quite inflamed, quite sore, we need to just give it a little rest for a day or two, gently move it, just walk around the house. A lot of people, when they think gentle movement, it's like they're immediately, going, oh, I'll just use 60% of my max today on a deadlift. Maybe not. Then after that, it's like, okay, hamstring. What I find, it depends on where the issue in the hamstring is. If it's closer to the knee, leg curling type motions are your king. If it is closer to the butt or the underbutt, and then you have to ask yourself, is it strained when I do a pike, or is it strained when I do a pancake? If it is strained on a pike, stiff leg deadlifts, stiff leg Romanians, these kind of things are key. Slow eccentrics. Or is it strained when I feel it in pancake? Then sumo hinging type exercises, so with the legs wider. These are key, or even box squats as well. All of these go in greatly and greatly help. Generally, it's you want to get stronger. You want to carefully increase the dose. You want your sets to last about 60 to 90 seconds, so you're not going for 1RMs to begin with. Generally, I want very slow eccentrics. I want nice, not so fast on the concentric as well. I want like a conscious tensioning of the hamstring to pull you up. These are fantastic exercises. These are I've used basically every rehab. Same with leg curls. Start, banded leg curls or floor slider leg curls. You're doing the hips elevated, shelk, I think it is, supine hip elevated leg curl. These kind of things. Progressing to like Nordics and GHRs and stuff like that. I like a GHR instead of a Nordic. I'll probably out myself there, but I think when done properly, it's quite nice. It's also a bit more loadable, a bit more controllable. But yeah, these are your main keys for rehabbing any sort of hamstring owie. Next question. How do we get tent hands like Morgan? Step one. So for those of you who don't know, Morgan is one of the models in Push Harder. It's one of my former students who is a machine of the highest caliber. And he has the tenty finger thing. To get the Morgan tent hands, you probably need to choose your parents more wisely next time on the reincarnation cycle. But other than that, it is down to that tented finger position. I do a smaller version of it where you keep the first knuckle off the ground, not on the ground as some people would say. It's very effective. A lot of other people use it as well, but it really comes down to wrist flexibility, like to get the tent Morgan has compared to others. Sergey Timoev, I can never say his name properly, he has it as well. And a few other hand balances. If you look around, once you can see it, know what you're looking for. But yeah, if you just can't do it naturally, you're probably going to have to stretch a lot and maybe you will never get it. So just work on the hand position that suits you more so than anything else. Top 3 exercises to improve back flexibility. Depends, are we talking the lower back or the upper back? So my number 1 exercise for improving back flexibility is, just ignoring the positions, is the back bend over support. It is one of these positions that will just keep giving and giving. And particularly, like, it's one of the positions I will use with people who are contortion level flexible, like, you know, going towards sort of sitting on their own heads or kind of advanced chest stands. And it's one of these exercises I'll give to, 55-year-old person who's never trained with me and, wants to just feel a bit better. It's one of those key ones that you can just keep getting out of it, because initially when your back's bending, it's kind of like you'll put it at one point, the main point of the curve, and try bend there. As you get better, because I normally recommend it on an edged surface, not a curved surface, that you can get really precise where the corner is, and you can eventually start aiming on groups of 3 or 4 of the thoracic vertebrae, and then in 2s, then in 1, so you can really max out the bend of the thoracic spine using this technique. So that's my number 1. One of the other things it teaches you how to use the ribs for back extension. One of the key things on getting the back to really move is to open the costotransverse joint. So to do this in a back bend is we need to breathe sideways, so the ribs move sideways and the air doesn't go into the stomach so much. So we can do this in this back bend, and it's much easier to learn here than it is when you're doing a bridge. So you breathe in, think about sending the ribs sideways. If you're wearing a sports bra, you can think about pushing the band sideways. If you're not wearing a sports bra, I suppose you could put a floss band around yourself to give you a tactile sensation to work with. But then this works like a ratchet. You breathe in, opens the costotransverse joint, pull yourself down, it'll close up again, breathe in, and kind of ratchet yourself deeper and deeper. Fantastic exercise. Next exercise. Which one is my favorite? I have to give it to the old bridge. The bridge push-up, actually, we'll put as number 2. The bridge push-up is one of these things that it is superior to bridge holds, and this is with feet elevated or feet on the floor, for developing the back flexibility. We are pushing up just up and down to the top of the head, not anything super fancy, not going all the way down to the floor onto our back. Once you learn the technique of this, it's an interesting motion because it has 2 stages. So we will push ourselves up into a bridge. We will get to the straight arm point, and most people think it stops there. So from here, you need to focus on what the back of the body is doing. You need to get the shoulders up to where they would be in your handstand, squeeze the glutes and posteriorly tilt the pelvis as hard as you can, then push the shoulders at the same time trying to pull. I always think about pulling the scapula to the sacrum or something like that. So you're pulling yourself deeper into it, and this will get you very deep into the bridge. You'll hold it for a couple of seconds, 3 seconds normally, and then come out, and then you repeat. And by what I found over years of training people is we were doing this push-up exercise, and it just worked better. It's one of those things. So now I just try and get, like, even when your bridge is, not a perfect, I don't normally have people doing it like when your feet elevated bridge was textbook bridge shape, then we'd work on it to build strength. I was like, no. We build the strength with this at the same time with the cueing I just described. you'll develop the bridge as well. So then at the end of it, you'll have like an epic bridge, and you'll have bridge push-ups. So the other thing is like, once you learn how to use the hips and use the whole back of the body to lift in this, you don't need a lot of strength. I kind of worked it out in an informal study that you only need to be able to do 5 floor push-ups to be able to do a bridge push-up. So it's not a big strength demand, whereas there is some ways of doing it where it's more like a Mexican handstand push-up where it's all just arms and shoulders, and that is very difficult. You need to be quite strong. Whereas if you can use the hips, kind of like a push press compared to a normal press, that we use the hips and the back of the body, and that lifts us, and the arms just kind of come along for the ride. So number 3 for back flexibility, it would have to be the drop back. The drop back, for those who don't know, or the half limber, or the limber, or the standing inversion, or I'm sure it has other names, is when you stand feet in whatever configuration you desire, and then bend and try to go from standing to a bridge without dropping into it. This is why I hate the name drop back, and it should be a control back. So when we're doing our control back, one of the things I really like about this is, first off, it develops, particularly for hand balancers and use listening in, it develops the strength we need for the Mexican. So we can develop the strength going in and out, and then we know once we can go down to the floor, we have all the strength you'll ever need for a Mexican, or you'll be able to do a few reps and do it quite comfortably. The other thing I really like about it is it's quite controllable once you get used to it. So there's kind of levels, like all these things, there's levels that we can just go down to the floor, or we can really use it to max out our active back bending ability by kind of like trying to consciously articulate every part of the spine as we go down, and then pull ourselves into a deeper arch, then roll the hips through and allow the hands to go down. So it becomes a hang back as well, will be a static version of this to try out. And our goal would be to, I like people to be able to lower down and hover their hands 10 centimeters off the ground for a few seconds before they put them on the ground. So those are my 3 favorite bridge exercises and 3 bang for buck. If you were to just do them as a program, and that was the only program you've done for bridge, do the back bend over support, bridge push-ups and drop backs, bar the hip flexor aspect, you probably have to get with a bit of long lunge or something like that. You would have a very good bridge after 6 or 7 months of doing that. So a lot to play there, really. Okay, I hope it's not too specific. I have a bad knee, 6 operations done. Is flexibility work dangerous in any way? It's one of those ones that's incredibly specific. If you've had 6 knee operations and haven't really got an overview of what they are, generally you would have to speak to your physio or your doctor. What I have seen from people who have blown their knees out, I've seen a lot of people blow their knees out from tumbling over the years. Some very nasty breaks, like all ligaments gone, and horrible stuff. I have seen people regain full flexibility and go beyond from that training with a proper structured rehab. So there is hope. Get a good physio. Give it time. It will take time. Even when you feel you're back to full training, you got full range established, it's still just at the knee joint. I mean, like knee flexion and extension. Still give it a lot of time. But I have seen people come back from very, very horrible breaks, and yeah, horrible ones. So hopefully yours wasn't that bad. Hopefully the operations go well. Get yourself good physio, good structured training, good structured plan. You can probably be back. Guidelines on end range strength. It's too vague a question. I've got nothing for you really, sorry, but I suppose the only guideline I can give you is the ability, if you take a position, here's one of the key things I do. Take any position you want and flip it 90 degrees and flip it 90 degrees and flip it 90 degrees. You want all of these to be within 90% of each other. So say you can go chest flat to the floor on a pancake. Well, then if we flip that 90 degrees, then our feet will be pointing up. So you want your straddle leg lift to be about 90% of the range of motion as your floor one. If it's not, you have some work to do. Then flip it 90 degrees again, or I missed 190. One of the 90s would be the standing pancake. You want that to be about 90%. Flip it 90 degrees again, and you're kind of in an inverted straddle plow. You want that to be about 90% as well. So that's a good guideline. That applies to basically every position. It's like, okay, compound positions like the front split, we have to look at the extension and the flexion side of the position separately. But bearing that in mind, then that will give you an idea of like, oh, I can say, for classic example, okay, I can do a pancake from a standing pancake, and I look at the side and it looks like a really good pancake, like my torso is perfectly in line with legs, my hips are over. But then when I sit on the floor, I'm rounded over and I can barely straighten my legs and it's not great. Well, then we have some work on our kind of hip flexors and the active musculature that will pull us deeper into the stretching. This is where you do a lot of compression work. So using this kind of guideline, just, any position you want, flip it around, flip it 90 degrees and then figure out what's working, what's not working, what's stretching, what's gravity assisting, what's gravity not assisting. And these can be a bit of guidelines. Is it safe if I had a hip mechanical inflammation doing a handstand? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by mechanical inflammation. If you mean by the joint, it depends on what you're doing. Is it it's always that thing of move to pain, not true pain. So if it's causing a little bit of pain on the subjective scale of like not too bad, I suppose it's okay. If it's very tough, I generally advise you to check someone out on that one. It's always kind of these things, find a position that doesn't hurt and train that. Train some kind of handstand that doesn't hurt or that works your skill and come back to it. It's very hard to give injury advice without really seeing a person in person and seeing what they can do and assessing. So the best I can here. Here's a good one, everyone's favorite one. Point training tips. How to train your point. So step one to training your point is to actually train your point. A lot of people just point their toes and think that's it. That is not training your point. Training your point is one you just have to understand what actually is a point. Like, I always think that the point happens at the heel. It doesn't happen at the foot and it doesn't happen at the toes. So we're trying to basically, my main focus when I point my toes is to pull when I point and you feel that kind of skin folding over at the back of the foot and the lower leg, I'm focusing on that and I'm trying to crush that. At the same time, I'm making sure my toes go straight to the front and not sickling in. This, like when done properly and just holding till it cramps, will train the point. Now, to spice it up, we can get if we get a TheraBand, these flat elastic bands that are a bit wide, get a strong one of them, or if you just don't have a strong one, double or triple over what you have. Then you can wrap the foot around. You kind of do calf extensions or points, but we go in with this pull of the heel, pulling the heel back to extend the foot. We keep the toes flexed, so it's a floint, if you're familiar with the terminology, and then we straighten the toes out into the band. And this will cause some severe cramping, so I suggest you all try it out. And then you will come out and you hold it. So you go in, hold 2, 3, out, hold 2, 3. And eventually you want to get to the point where you can just hold this against the band resistant for 20, 30 seconds. The other thing is like trying to differentiate the point and the claw. So point in one of these things is it's become peak shifted in a lot of disciplines where like it's not just a straight leg and it's not just straight with a little curve that is mimics classical architecture and all these kind of things, whereas like it's gone beyond that and it's like a curved end, like the end of a crescent moon, I suppose. And that can be trained. It is partly genetic as well, but also training it from a very young age, as you would see a lot of dancers have done. But learning to lift the arch up while maintaining that heel coming away will help as well, cause some cramping as well. And it's also like, what are you trying to get? Are you just trying to get the leg straight, or are you trying to get that the full crescent moon, or the full claw as it's known? I'm sure there's a better name than the claw, but that's what my students call it, the claw. Other than that, the DIY point stretcher is always fun as well. So you see these point stretching devices, they come around every now and then. There's like a shoe that you put your foot in, you crank it up, or you get a special wooden thing with elastic straps and all. You can just replicate the same thing with a yoga block. So you if you imagine this, you will put the band around your toes, around the front of your foot. You will put the yoga block in the middle of your arch, and then you'll pull the band up towards the knee while straightening the leg, and that will stretch your point just as good as any of the things and cost you a fraction of the point, fraction of the cost. And then the other thing is just make sure you train. It's one of those things I've seen a lot in dancers, actually, in ballerinas, is they have shifted arcs in the ankles where their points are well beyond what was reasonable, but their dorsiflexion is like minimal, even in people who are hypermobile, who would normally have quite good dorsiflexion. It's just the arc of the joint has basically been shifted in favor of pointing. So just bear that in mind. It's well, when you see these fantastic points, they've probably been doing it a very long time. So check my questions, see what else I got. I think that is all for all the questions we have this evening. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed listening into me rambling away for quite some time. Hopefully next week Mikael will be back on the scene and he will be able to tell us all about what they have going on in the company and the show. I'm super excited about that. Other than that, if you were interested in learning how we actually approach flexibility training and sort of in tandem with handstand practice as well, it's one of the things we do very well with Handstand Factory is we have our programs available on handstandfactory.com. Every program, or most of the programs, bar Keep Pushing, has a flexibility training component. We train pancake and pike in press, we train middle splits for one arm handstand, and we train pike and shoulder flexibility in push. So there's a lot there. It's also what I think is really cool about the programs is the programs, the cueing and the exercises in the handstand thing are also some of the flexibility development exercises. So you're basically always working in synergy with your own training. So a lot of cool stuff in there, a lot of interesting behind the scenes thought went into how to make that work, and it works very well, I'm proud to say. So if you want to check it out, check it out. Other than that, my YouTube channel, Emmet Lewis, check it out. I have loads of tutorials and other stuff to try out there. And other than that, thank you for tuning in and good night.